In a distant village bathed in the African sun and the whispers of great baobabs, lived the richest man in the area, known as Kofi. His palace, adorned with sculptures and vibrant fabrics, stood majestically in the heart of the village, a testament to his prosperity. Kofi shared this opulent abode with his wife, Ama, a woman of character known for her strictness and authority. One day, like many others, Kofi was walking through the long corridors of his palace when he crossed paths with one of his maidservants, Makena. Her striking beauty captured Kofi's attention not only for her elegance, but also for her natural grace. Despite the high position and respect Kofi had always maintained towards his staff, he found himself irresistibly drawn to the young woman. In the following days, a palpable tension settled in the air, with Kofi seeking Makena's company more and more often under various pretexts. Finally, one evening, the situation escalated. Kofi, overcome by his emotions, involved Makena in an act that went against her will. Deeply troubled, Makena confided in her colleague and friend, Adiza. She told her everything, expressing her distress and discomfort over what had happened. Adiza, who had long harbored unrequited feelings for Kofi, felt a pang of jealousy and betrayal. Upset and driven by a desire for revenge, as well as disappointment, she decided to reveal the secret to Ama. One afternoon, as the sun was setting and shadows lengthened on the palace walls, Adiza found Ama in her private garden and disclosed the entire affair. Ama, furious and hurt, did not take the time to verify the story. Her anger quickly turned into action. She confronted Makena, who, overwhelmed by shame and fear, could only stammer a few words. Without further ado, Ama expelled her from the palace. Then, her suspicions turning to Adiza, who she had once caught speaking a bit too amicably with Kofi, decided to get rid of all her maidservants, believing their presence corrupted the harmony of her home. The palace, once vibrant with the life and laughter of numerous servants, became a much quieter and darker place. Kofi, realizing the magnitude of his mistake, found himself contemplating the consequences of his actions, while Ama, though having restored order, felt more isolated than ever. In the months that followed Ama's decision to dismiss all the maidservants, the tension between her and Kofi only increased. The thorny issue of replacing the domestic staff regularly became the heart of their disputes. Kofi, wanting to restore normalcy and efficiency within their home, advocated for hiring new maidservants. However, Ama, scarred by the past events and determined never to relive such misadventures, insisted that only men be hired. She believed this would prevent the issues of jealousy and temptation that had previously troubled their lives. After many heated debates and tense exchanges, Kofi, tired and eager to end these incessant quarrels, finally gave in to Ama's demands. The couple then proceeded to hire several male servants. Among them were men of various statures and skills, but none could compare to Kwame. He stood out not only for his robustness and imposing stature, which gave him an almost royal presence, but also for his impeccable morality and integrity. Kwame, with his seriousness and commitment to his work, was in stark contrast to the others who, while efficient, did not possess his natural charisma or work ethic. His reputation for uprightness and adherence to ethical principles earned him the immediate respect of the other staff members and a hidden distrust from Ama, who saw him as a potential problem due to his stature and growing influence among the other servants. Meanwhile, the pressure on Ama to conceive an heir was intensifying. Kofi's family, worried about the absence of a descendant, began to question the viability of the marriage. Facing constant criticism and driven by her own desire for motherhood, Ama felt increasingly desperate. In a moment of profound vulnerability, Ama attempted to seduce Kwame, thinking that perhaps the fertility issue lay with Kofi. However, Kwame, shocked and faithful to his principles, firmly rejected her advances. Humiliated and angry, Ama, in a desperate move, falsely accused Kwame of attempted rape. The matter quickly escalated, and despite his attempts to prove his innocence, Kwame found himself imprisoned, a victim of Ama's manipulations and her influential power in the village. Exhausted by her failures and overwhelmed by guilt, Ama eventually consulted a renowned fetish priest in a neighboring village. After a series of rituals, the fetish priest revealed to Ama that her past actions, specifically her regular consumption of potions to avoid pregnancy during her youth, had compromised her fertility. However, he offered her a glimmer of hope. She could conceive if she performed a specific ritual with him on a full moon night by a river in a dense forest. Desperate to fulfill her desire for motherhood, Ama accepted this controversial proposition, hoping to end her torment and restore her status within the palace and the community. The night of the ritual arrived, shrouded in the mystical veil of a full moon that faintly illuminated the dark contours of the dense forest. Ama, accompanied by the fetish priest, went to the edge of the sacred river where the ritual was to take place. The air was filled with a palpable sense of anticipation as the fetish priest prepared the area with symbols and ritual herbs. As the ritual progressed, Ama, enveloped in the chants and incantations of the fetish priest, discovered that one final crucial step was necessary to seal the fertility process. She had to physically unite with the fetish priest. Driven by her deep desire for motherhood and convinced that this was the only path to realizing the dark contours of the Ents forest. Ama, accompanied by the fetish priest, went to the edge of the sacred river where the ritual was to take place. The air was filled with a palpable sense of anticipation as the fetish priest prepared the area with symbols and ritual herbs. As the ritual progressed, Ama, enveloped in the chants and incantations of the fetish priest, discovered that one final crucial step was necessary to seal the fertility process. She had to physically unite with the fetish priest. Driven by her deep desire for motherhood and convinced that this was the only path to realizing her wish, she accepted without hesitation. Months later, the signs were unmistakable. Ama was pregnant. When she shared the news with Kofi, he was overwhelmed with unprecedented happiness. Convinced that he was finally about to get the long-awaited heir, he organized a grand celebration, the preparations and festivities of which promised to leave a lasting impression far beyond the village borders. Kofi's family, once critical of Ama, now welcomed her with warmth and joy, celebrating this news that seemed to mend many fractures. However, on the day of the celebration, as the entire village shared in the family's joy, an unexpected visitor burst in. Makena, the maidservant once expelled from the palace, visibly pregnant in an advanced stage. She then revealed that she was expecting Kofi's child. After being sent away, Makena had joined her sick mother in a neighboring village, struggling to survive in dire conditions. Sometime after her departure, she had discovered her pregnancy. Facing adversity, she and her mother had supported each other to manage the difficult situation. But following her mother's tragic death and the announcement of Ama's pregnancy celebrations, Makena felt cornered and saw no other option but to return to the palace to reveal her situation. Makena's revelation plunged the village into astonishment. Ama, devastated by this new disturbance, flew into a black rage. The celebration was interrupted by heated discussions and emotional confrontations. Finally, the village elders, after hearing Kofi's confession about his past affair with Makena, decided that justice and fairness demanded that Kofi take responsibility. They required him to acknowledge his act by taking Makena as a second wife, a resolution that, although resolving the apparent conflict, left Ama deeply hurt and disturbed by the turn of events in her once controlled and orderly life. In the complex cohabitation of the palace, where Kofi now lived with his two wives, Ama and Makena, as well as their servants, the atmosphere was charged with constant but manageable tension. Kofi, aware of the increased responsibility with 2 pregnant women under his roof, Kofi began to deeply reflect on his past actions. He wanted to ensure that nothing from his past could cast a shadow over the impending birth of his heirs. This introspection led him to reconsider some of his decisions that might have hurt innocent people, fearing that such acts could harm his descendants. One of the memories that particularly haunted him was that of Kwame, the strong and handsome servant who had been unjustly imprisoned due to Ama's accusations. Consumed by doubt and eager to rectify any potential mistakes, Kofi decided to visit Kwame in prison to hear his side of the story, away from the influences and pressures of the palace. Upon arriving at the prison, Kofi was greeted by the guards, who, recognizing their distinguished visitor, began to speak about Kwame's behavior since his incarceration. They recounted how Kwame had made a positive impact on the other inmates. Not only did he give them hope, but he also encouraged them to change and improve their conduct. His presence had transformed the prison's atmosphere, as Kwame protected the weaker inmates and became an example of resilience and kindness in an often brutal environment. Inspired and impressed by these testimonies, Kofi approached Kwame's cell. Through the bars, he listened attentively as Kwame calmly shared his version of the events that had led to his imprisonment. Prepared by the guards' praises, Kofi was moved by Kwame's innocence and dignity, and finally understood that this man had been a victim of a grave injustice. Determined to right this wrong, Kofi acted quickly and discreetly, without informing Ama. After securing Kwame's release, he offered him a substantial sum of money, not only as compensation for the suffering endured, but also as a sincere gesture of apology for the harm caused by his family. This action, though secret, marked an important step in Kofi's quest for personal redemption and the protection of his extended family's future. 2 months after Kwame's release, Makina gave birth to a boy, thus fulfilling Kofi's deepest desire to have a son and heir. This birth brought immense joy to Kofi, who saw the continuity of his lineage finally assured. However, the atmosphere in the palace remained complex, with the presence of his 2 wives and their often tense dynamics. A few months later, Ama's pregnancy became visible to all, adding to the sense of renewal within the extended family. But a strange behavior from Ama began to worry Kofi. She now avoided having Kofi spend the nights with her, citing various health or comfort reasons. Troubled by this change, Kofi insisted one evening on staying with Ama, wanting to reconnect with her and support her during the pregnancy. Ama finally agreed to Kofi's request, and he spent the night by her side. However, in the middle of the night, while Ama slept deeply, Kofi, unable to sleep, made a shocking discovery. As he turned towards her, he noticed that her belly was surprisingly flat, with no apparent signs of pregnancy. Stunned, he remained frozen, wondering how this could be possible. Kofi kept his composure that night, pretending nothing was amiss, but his mind was racing, searching for an explanation for what he had seen. All night long, Kofi stayed awake, ruminating on this incomprehensible situation. He began to wonder if Ama had a lover, or if she was faking her pregnancy for some unknown reason. Deeply hurt by the possibility of such a betrayal, Kofi decided to act at dawn. Early in the morning, he summoned all the members of the palace for an important announcement. In front of everyone, he declared that he was separating from Ama, accusing her of lying about her pregnancy. The reaction was unanimous. All were shocked and considered Kofi's attitude to be inappropriate and brutal. Ama, surprised and outraged by such accusations, demanded explanations. In response, Kofi revealed what he had seen the previous night, asserting that Ama was not pregnant. Faced with these accusations, Ama, indignant, lifted her robe in front of everyone to prove her pregnancy. Seeing her round, pregnant belly, confusion set in for Kofi, who could not understand how he had been so mistaken. The tension rose, and Ama, feeling humiliated, played on the emotions of everyone to gain their sympathy, including that of Makena. Kofi, although internally convinced of what he had seen, began to doubt his own perception. To restore peace and out of fear of further isolating his family, he admitted that he might have been a victim of hallucinations due to a temporary sleepwalking episode. With humility, he apologized to Amma, trying to regain her trust and that of others, while internally struggling with the doubts that continued to haunt him. A few days after the strange incident during which Kofi had discovered Amma's unusually flat belly at night, she, aware that the phenomenon occurred regularly, decided to seek explanations. She suspected that this abnormal behavior of her pregnancy was linked to the mystical practices undertaken with the fetish priest to conceive. Fearing that Kofi might discover the truth again and expel her, Amma set out for the neighbouring village where the fetish priest, responsible for her pregnancy, resided. Unknown to Amma, Kwame, who had been unjustly imprisoned because of her and was unaware if she knew of his release, also resided in this village. After being released by Kofi, he had chosen to take refuge there, seeking tranquility after the turmoil he had experienced. By a twist of fate, he saw Amma heading towards the fetish priest's house. Curious to understand what could lead Amma to visit this mysterious man, Kwame decided to follow her discreetly to the fetish priest's dwelling. Hiding near a window, Kwame listened attentively to the conversation between Amma and the fetish priest. During this meeting, the fetish priest informed Amma that there was no solution to her problem. Her pregnancy would continue to disappear each night until childbirth. Terrified at the thought that Kofi might one day discover this anomaly, Amma conspired with the fetish priest to find a way to ensure that Kofi would not leave her. Never, even if he discovered the truth. The fetish priest gave her something to mix into Kofi's food, a spell meant to completely subdue him to her will. Kwame, stunned by what he heard, realized the urgency of the situation. He knew of Kofi's kindness, the man who had freed him, and felt obligated to protect him. After quickly leaving the scene without being noticed, Kwame hurried to the neighbouring village to warn Kofi of his wife's malevolent plans. The next day, to everyone's surprise, Amma decided to cook despite her condition. While everyone, including Kofi who pretended ignorance, rejoiced at this gesture, Kofi had already been informed by Kwame. When everyone was at the table, Kofi, still playing along, directly accused Amma of attempting to poison him by cooking that day. Faced with Amma's defense, which portrayed her as a victim, Kofi asked her to eat from the plate she had prepared for him. After a moment of tension where everyone began to doubt, Amma finally agreed to eat from the plate, and nothing happened. Once again, it seemed that Kofi was wrong. He said nothing more and left the palace in secret to see Kwame. Kofi wanted to verify if what Kwame had said was true. Kwame promised he would come to the palace the next day to tell everyone what he had seen and heard, so the whole situation would be clarified. The next morning, something unexpected and serious happened. Amma realized that her belly had become completely flat again. Her pregnancy had disappeared. It was probably because of the dish she had prepared the day before for Kofi, into which she had mixed the items given to her by the fetish priest to enchant Kofi. Amma didn't fully understand what had happened, but she was overwhelmed by shame and despair. She stayed hidden under her sheets, her flattened belly concealed from view, wrapped in the darkness and silence of her room, her tears soaking the sheets where she sought refuge. Concerned by Amma's prolonged absence, Makena gently entered her room. There she found Amma hidden under the sheets, her eyes red and glistening with tears. Makena, touched by the distress of her rival but also a palace companion, tried to offer her comfort and understand the source of her sorrow. However, Amma, crushed by her secret and fear of the future, couldn't find the words to respond. Her tears spoke for her. In this atmosphere charged with emotion, Kwame made his triumphant entry into the palace. The reunion was joyous, with former colleagues celebrating him as a hero who had returned from afar. Kofi, in particular, felt profound gratitude towards the man who had protected him from the dangers of manipulated truth. While the palace resonated with cheers for Kwame, Makena discreetly approached Kofi to share her alarming discovery. Ama's pregnancy had completely disappeared. Before Kwame had the chance to reveal the schemes he had overheard, Ama emerged, her face marked by resolution and regret. With a suitcase in hand, she confessed to everyone the wrongs she had committed, from Kwame's unjust imprisonment to the dark manipulations of her mysterious pregnancy. She implored Makena to take care of Kofi in the palace, declaring herself unworthy of their company. Kofi, distressed, tried to persuade her to stay, arguing that everyone has faults and deserves a second chance. But Ama, her decision firmly anchored in her wounded heart, chose to leave, disappearing into the shadows of the paths and the rumours of neighbouring villages. In the days that followed, Makena established herself as Kofi's sole companion, and Kwame, much more than a servant, became a devoted friend and protector. The news of the fetish priest's tragic death under a tree in the neighbouring village added a sombre note to this period of transition. Kofi, Makena, and their young son Sofa, whose name symbolises the importance of remembering the lessons of the past to build the future, found a new harmony. This story, woven with betrayal and redemption, reminds us that truth and sincerity are the foundations of a strong and united community. It also teaches us that even in the depths of despair, hope and change are possible, allowing us to heal the wounds of the past and walk together toward a better future.